Have you ever wondered how we can find signs of God in life's darkest moments? Or marveled at a family's ability not just to survive, but to thrive after facing unimaginable tragedy? These questions are at the forefront of our minds when we meet such a family. So settle in and prepare for an emotional, inspiring, and life-altering experience. We're about to dive into the pages of the Levitt family's extraordinary story, a tale that proves the resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering strength of faith. Introducing Jenny and Caleb, who will be your guides on this remarkable journey. They'll share a story that challenges conventions and inspires all who hear it.
Hi everyone, we're back again. I'm Jenny. This is Caleb, our son, and we've been discussing the accident that took the life of our youngest son, his brother, but also the aftermath. What happened after that, and we've been talking about how we almost lost Caleb that night too. He had catastrophic injuries, all the surgeries and all the recovery that you had to do. We've gotten to the point where we were talking about you coming home in the wheelchair and the adjustments, even to going not just home but back to church. And we've kind of touched on it a couple times now, but I wanted to see if you would mind sharing about how there had to have been some kind of breakthrough. You were sharing just a few minutes ago on the last video about how angry and bitter and like you didn't even want to go to the altar and pray and talk to God. And obviously you're not like that now, so what happened to change that?
I think that the first step happened. So I was able to drive myself first time. So it had to have been, I'm thinking at least April or May of the next year. And so you're thinking probably at least 8 or 9 months after the accident and that whole, so I said that the first 3 months I was just really focused on the whole recovery aspect of it. But then after that is whenever it really kind of set in, and that angerness, just the bitterness, it just began to manifest itself more and more. And it really came out in my speech, but also my thoughts, just how I was thinking towards others, just some of the plans. But what I can say too is I felt like my mind felt so chaotic and it wasn't stable during those times. Like I would go from one thing to the next and it was like I couldn't finish what I was starting, and like my mind would just kind of hop from one thing to the next. And so that's kind of what I've noticed now as I look back. But you began to go to a counselor, for grief.
Yeah.
And I think you talked to me at least a couple times about going, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. With my non-filtered self, I was like, no, why would I do that? I don't need that. Whenever I did, but in that moment I didn't want to. So finally I think that you picked at me enough that I went to one.
And I felt horrible because I had to go back to work in January. I had to.
Yeah. And
they were great and they worked with me and I didn't have to go straight back to full time, but you were still home alone. And I know you were 20 years old, but the mom in me was like, oh, I hate this. He's home, all by himself.
I slept a lot, watched a lot of stuff, just to kind of, pass the time and all of that, which wasn't the best. I mean, and it's kind of weird. My relationship with God, it felt so close whenever I was recovering, and then even right after I was at home. But after a couple months, it just kind of petered out, and then that's whenever all these, emotions kind of began to start to come in stronger and stronger.
That's actually one of the things that I've told people before, is one of the things I don't like about when you start looking into like grief is they'll talk about like the 5 stages of grief and stuff like that. That's so not accurate because that makes it seem like
it's linear.
Yeah, like this little checklist and okay, well I'm done with that stage, and it's not like that at all. I went through phases like that where you feel really close to God and then you're just like, where are you? Like I don't even feel you at all. And then you'll have a break, so it's not linear. And I feel like that is discouraging to people who don't understand that. And we didn't understand that because you don't really until you go through it. You really don't. Which is one reason why, we're doing this, is to try to help other people know that you're normal. That's perfectly normal to feel that.
True.
So anyway, I'm sorry, back to what you were saying.
Yeah, so I went to the counselor. So the first time walk in, and that was never there in the house-ish thing,
Mm-hmm.
and so, so I walk into, and so first of all, I'm automatically judging it, like, who is this in a house, what kind of establishment is this, all in my head, and so then I walk into the room, I take a seat, I mean, I don't know this lady, at all, and so, like, in my heart, I'm like, I'm not going to say anything, so, she's trying to, question me, just, not anything too heavy, and I'm just giving her, one word answers or just, very, very, very short answers, not a lot of meat to help out, and that's kind of how it went for about, I don't know, I mean, most of 45 minutes of it, and then finally at the end, I was just, because honestly, I wanted it to be one and done. Get in there, okay, get it, and then I'm out of here. And so finally, I asked her something along the lines of, okay, so, are we going to discuss what we came here for, which was, the accident. And she said no. And I was like, what? I want this to be over. What do you mean? And so keep in mind, I had not given this lady any information, like at all, like yes, no, okay, so those type of things. But I mean, nothing about me at all, like no names, anything. And she said that before we could even begin to look at the accident, that I needed to forgive my dad and God. I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, that's a lie, whatever, chick. And so I'm like, all right, whatever. And then I get up and I walk out, but it's just playing on me, and it's playing in my head, and I'm just driving along. No, whatever. So I'm not sure, but it was within the next couple of days where I really began to think about it, and I realized that I had hated my dad for a while, for at least a couple of years, and we had our run-ins.
You're both strong-willed.
Yes.
And there was a lot of butting heads.
There was, and rightfully so. My dad was the one that should have won in those arguments because what he said should have won, but I was very strong-willed. So I was like, I want to do what I want to do and get out of my face, bro.
Which did not go over well with him.
Didn't go over well with Dad. No, did not. And Dad has, I don't know if admitted, but attested to this, that he wasn't shown from his father, or really from his mother, for most of his life, how to show affection, how to show love. So me and Jacob never really felt that. And I feel like just because I was so similar to Dad in a lot of things, and still am, I felt like I got the brunt of a lot of it, but I also know now that I deserved it because of my actions.
And you were the oldest. That contributes to it.
So, I think that that's just a part of it, and then growing up you realize how much of that you were definitely part of the problem. But so I just realized that probably from my mid-teens, and so you're looking at it, and by now I'm 21, so we're looking at probably at least 5 years, I had hated my dad. And in those years of where you're trying to figure out what you want to be, career-wise, and everything, and it all began to become so clear whenever anybody would ask me what I wanted to be. My first response was not what I wanted to be, it was that whatever my dad isn't, that's what I want to be. And that's so shocking to people, because people see him at the church, and I was so warped that I'm like, yeah, but like you don't know him like I do though. And I'm pointing out all my dad's flaws instead of looking at all the good things that he did for us and for, just for us, the family. And so I'm looking at all these things, and whenever I was able to admit that, then I began kind of longer road to admitting that, and I still haven't arrived at it yet, if it was because I hated God that went on to Dad, or was it because I viewed Dad a certain way. Either way, I hated both of them. And so I began to admit that, and I remember laying in my bed one night once I had admitted it, and I was like, yeah, I hate you, God, and you deserve it. And sometimes, especially then, like my conversation even with God would get a little bit colorful, so I'm going to clean it up. But basically, like, I don't give a freak what you think. Like, you left us there on that road, and I'm just venting to God. And I felt like after I gotten everything out, and like it's almost like I'm just waiting for him to defend, and there's nothing. There's no response. And that's kind of the first breaking point in that part of my life where I just broke, and I said, God, I want more than this. I don't want to feel broken anymore. Like, it's so overwhelming to feel this way all the time, to feel so angry, so bitter all the time. And I'm like, I just want healing. And I think I said, if you can give me that healing, then I will work on forgiving. And then that was the road back, I think. That was at least the first step. But it was going there, even though I wasn't very open, and I'm so grateful that that counselor, and because I asked her later, I was like, how did you even know that? Like, you even talking? And she said that God woke her up that morning and said, you're going to have a client, and he's going to come in, and he's going to be so angry. And he's going to be angry at me. And from there, it was... So to have somebody who didn't know me, but listened to God enough to help me through that part of my life. So, and I think it's like sometimes people just need somebody like that, who aren't connected, that they just feel like they feel more safe going to, but that God can just speak to you about, So I think that was the first step in recovery. And then just having that moment with God where I think people think that God's going to be shocked if they're not, perfect and all put together. And the truth is, God already knows you. He already knows everything that you're going through, everything that you're thinking, whether or not you hate him. And he really doesn't care, because God's love for us is so great that he will take us just that way. But he says, if you will let me in, I will bring you healing, but you have to ask for it.
I remember the night of the accident, being in that little room, and they had just come in to tell us that they finally figured out where Jacob was, and what the confusion was because Jacob was taken directly to the morgue. Since he died on the scene, he was not taken to the hospital. And your dad had stepped out to give the church family that had come there an update, and I stayed in the room. And part of the reason is because I did want to be there in case they came with an update about you. But another part of the reason is because I was so mad, and my thoughts were all over the place. And I remember he stepped out of the room, and I share this a little bit in the book. This is the first time I think I'll really share the whole thing, but I remember being like, God, where were you? Where were you? Why let Jacob die alone by himself in the rain on a dark roadway at midnight? Where were you? And instead of judgment, instead of, like you talked about, instead of him defending himself, almost instantly, you know how us Christians, we say that God spoke to us, and I think sometimes if people are watching and they're not a believer, you could think that we're a little crazy, and we're saying that like we heard this audible. Yeah. It wasn't like that, but like on the inside, I was right there, and I met him right there on that road, and I was like so blown away. I'm in that room, and I'm like, God, you are so good, because that was just so nasty to you. I didn't have color for words, like you said, but I mean, I was just like, I don't get this, God. I really don't get this. We have been serving you for a long time. We were doing something at the church to bring people into your family, into the kingdom of God. Where were you? Jacob and I, in the mornings when we would go for those walks and we would pray at the end, almost every morning we prayed for God's protection around our family. So all these thoughts are going through my mind, and I'm like, I don't get it. Where were you? But I didn't get that condemnation or that judgment from him when I was completely just open and honest with him like that. Like you said, I just got that love and that like understanding that he understood what I needed as a mom, that I needed to know my son didn't just die by himself on the roadway, that our Savior actually met him, and that he was with him. And he knew that that's what I needed. And I've told people before that lots of people will tell you, if you're grieving, they'll say something along the lines of, you can't question God, that's not our place. And your dad has actually told people, my husband is a pastor. For those of you that don't know, my husband is a pastor. And he, talks about our bits of our story a lot. I mean, just it's part of our life. It's part of who we are. And he'll tell people, God is not intimidated by our question. Job, who people love to point out as an example, because he lost everything, Job questioned God, and God did put Job in his place. But even then, when you read it, he wasn't like condemning him for asking, or like sending judgment on him for asking. He was just reminding him, I am God and you are not. There are some things you're just not going to understand in this life. And you have to get to that place where you're like, but you are still God and I am not. So I think that'll be good to wrap up for this video. And then in the next one, we'll tackle some more maybe about those first. So we'll talk about that soon too. So that's it for now.
Until then, find hope in stories like this. Thank you for being a part of our journey. To stay updated, remember to subscribe and ring that notification bell